Andre Mitchell stood at the sliding glass door of his kitchen, frozen, one hand still gripping his morning coffee. Outside, in the middle of his backyard, Susan Whitmore was lounging on a floatie in his pool like it was the Ritz. He blinked, just to make sure he wasn't dreaming. But no, there she was, sunglasses on, arms spread wide across her inflatable swan, basking in the sun like she owned the place. She didn't wave. She didn't even flinch. She just casually turned her head and sipped from a tall glass of lemonade that she must have brought from his outdoor bar. Andre muttered to himself, "You've got to be kidding me." It was 7:43 a.m. on a Saturday. This wasn't just any Saturday. It was the first weekend Andre had taken off in over 2 months. As a senior software architect juggling deadlines and investors, he'd earned this break. His backyard oasis was his reward. A crisp blue pool framed by bamboo hedges, string lights, and a perfectly varnished cedar deck. A small slice of heaven he'd built from scratch over 5 years. And now, Susan Whitmore was marinating in it like it belonged to her. Andre sighed, jaw tightening. He set his coffee down, stepped into his sandals, and slid open the door. The scent of chlorine, roses, and lavender filled the air as he walked down the patio steps. Susan looked over, calmly, smugly. "Oh, morning!" she chirped, as if she were greeting a hotel concierge. "Hope you don't mind. It's going to be hot today, and honestly, your pool just looks so inviting." Andre stopped at the edge of the water, trying to stay composed. "Susan, this is my property. My private pool." She smiled, unmoved. "Oh, don't be so territorial. We are neighbors, after all. You've barely been using it." Andre stared at her, the audacity sinking in like concrete. And suddenly, everything from the past year came rushing back, every loaded comment Susan had made. The way she'd once asked if his parents were the gardeners. The time she left a note in his mailbox suggesting that bright colors on his patio furniture might lower neighborhood property values. And now she was in his pool. There was no mistaking it anymore. This wasn't just entitlement. This was deliberate, calculated, and personal. And Andre knew this wasn't going to end with a polite request to leave. It was time to remind Susan exactly whose water she was swimming in. Andre didn't say another word that morning. He simply turned around, walked back inside, and shut the glass door behind him, slowly, carefully, the way you do when you're trying not to shatter something. Like peace. Or patience. Susan stayed in the pool for another 45 minutes. When she finally left, towel over one shoulder, dripping water across his travertine tiles like a wet cat that didn't care, she didn't apologize. She didn't ask. She didn't even look back. She just called out over her shoulder, "Thanks, neighbor. Let me know if you're hosting any barbecues." That's when Andre knew this wasn't the first boundary Susan crossed. It was just the boldest. He started remembering it all. The first time he met Susan, she had leaned over the shared hedge, gave him a long once-over, and said, "Oh, you're the new homeowner? I just assumed the contractor hadn't left yet." He'd laughed, awkwardly, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Then came the suggestions. The time she gently hinted that Andre's Japanese maple tree might clash with the neighborhood aesthetic. That the koi pond he built reminded her of those little urban gardens you see in Chinatown. Or the time he had friends over, 3 other engineers from his team, 2 of them black, and Susan walked right up to the gate and said, "Just checking. Everything all right here?" Saw a lot of unfamiliar cars. Unfamiliar cars. Andre had let it slide again and again, because that's what people like him are taught to do: stay calm, don't escalate, don't feed the stereotype. He had been raised to be patient, respectful, civil. But Susan wasn't ignorant. She was precise. Her microaggressions were more like scalpels, sharp, controlled, and intended to cut without bleeding. Comments wrapped in compliments, jabs disguised as concern. And now, she'd gone from passive-aggressive to straight-up invasive. It wasn't just that she thought she could use his pool. It was that she thought he wouldn't stop her, Andre walked out to his deck later that evening and stared at the still water. It reflected the string lights above like stars trapped beneath the surface. Beautiful. Calm. Untouched. Exactly how he wanted it. Exactly how Susan didn't deserve it. He ran a hand over the rail and sighed. He knew this neighborhood came with people like her, those who believed in invisible lines, in belonging, as something to be policed. What he didn't expect was how quickly those lines would be drawn across his backyard. This wasn't about a pool. It never had been. And Andre realized, the next time she crossed that line, she wouldn't be swimming out so easily. The next morning, Andre set an alarm for 6:30 a.m. He didn't normally wake up that early on Sundays, but something told him this wasn't over. He brewed a strong cup of dark roast, pulled back the blinds, and just like he expected, Susan was already there. This time, she wasn't floating. She was doing laps. Perfect strokes, right down the center of the pool. Like it was her morning routine. Like this wasn't the second time she'd broken into his yard, but the 100th. Andre's grip tightened around his mug. He waited until she reached the shallow end and stood up, water dripping from her shoulders, slicking back her graying hair like she was auditioning for a shampoo commercial. Then he slid the door open and stepped outside. "Morning, Andre," she said cheerily, without a trace of shame. "You really should think about installing a towel rack out here. It'd be so convenient." He stared at her. "Susan, what are you doing?" She blinked innocently. "What do you mean?" "Just getting in some cardio. You know, it's so hard to stay fit after 50. You'll see." She chuckled to herself. Andre didn't laugh. He walked closer, standing at the edge of the pool. "I didn't give you permission to be here." Again. Susan rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Why are you being so uptight? It's not like I'm hurting anything. You weren't even using it." "That's not the point." "Well then, what is the point?" Her smile started to fade, replaced by something harder. "Are you seriously going to make this a thing? Over a pool?" "Yes," Andre said firmly. "Over my pool. On my property." Susan scoffed. "You know, I try to be nice. I try to be welcoming. But you're making it really hard, Andre." Andre raised an eyebrow. "Welcoming? You broke into my yard." She swam a slow circle in the shallow end, treading water lazily. "You people are always so sensitive." That was it. Those two words. You people. Andre felt something in his chest turn to stone. But he kept his voice calm. "Susan, get out of the pool." She gave a humorless laugh. "Why? Are you going to call the cops?" "Please." "They'd laugh in your face." "Try me," Andre said quietly. Susan stopped moving. Her face hardened. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 23 years, she said coldly. "I helped found the HOA. I watched this place go from upper class to transitional. And now you're acting like you set the rules?" Andre didn't blink. "There is no HOA anymore, Susan. It was dissolved 6 years ago. Because of people like you," she snapped. There it was. Bare. Unfiltered. Andre felt the heat rise in his chest, but he forced himself to stay rooted. He wouldn't let her win. He stepped back from the edge of the pool. "This is your final warning. If I catch you here again, I will press charges." Susan swam to the edge and pulled herself out, wrapping herself in one of his towels. "Oh, please. You won't do anything. People like you love to talk big, but you never follow through." She walked right past him, water dripping onto the deck. And then, for good measure, she tossed over her shoulder. "You should be grateful I'm even keeping you company. Most people wouldn't bother." Andre didn't respond. He just watched her go, fists clenched at his sides. He wasn't going to call the police, not yet. But he was done playing polite. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was war. And Susan had just declared it. Andre didn't sleep well that night. He tossed and turned, thoughts racing, Susan's smirks, her flippant tone, the way she flung his own towel over her shoulder like she'd bought it at Pottery Barn. But it wasn't just the intrusion. It was the message, "You don't belong here." And she'd made it crystal clear. The next few days, she didn't come near the pool. Not physically. But she made her presence known. On Tuesday morning, Andre found a rolled-up flyer taped to his mailbox. Neighborhood beautification tips, with highlighted reminders about maintaining appropriate backyard colors, and a note handle. Written in blue pen, "Consider painting that dark fence something more cheerful, smiley face. A friendly neighbor." On Wednesday, she stopped him while he was taking out the trash. "You know, when I moved in here, we all used to wave to each other. I just think it's a shame how disconnected things have become since some people moved in." Andre raised an eyebrow. "Some people?" Susan gave a tight smile. "Don't be like that. You know what I mean." He did. It wasn't just passive-aggressive anymore. It was active. Targeted. On Friday, he was mowing his front lawn when he noticed her talking to a pair of neighbors, an older couple walking their dog. As he passed by with his mower, she made no effort to lower her voice. "I just think standards matter," she said loudly. "I mean, not everyone grew up understanding what a real neighborhood is supposed to look like. Some cultures just have different values, you know." Andre stopped mid-strip. He turned off the mower and stared. The couple looked uncomfortable, nodded awkwardly, and quickly kept walking. Susan turned to him with a raised brow. "Problem?" "No," he said evenly. "Just wondering how much longer you're planning to live in the 1950s. She smiled. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere. I'm a fixture here." That evening, Andre sat by the pool, sipping ginger tea, staring into the calm water. He tried to shake it off. He'd dealt with this before. In college. At job interviews. At airports. But never at home. That's what made it worse. This wasn't just about race. It was about control. She didn't just want to insult him, she wanted to rewrite the rules of the neighborhood to suit her comfort, her sense of superiority. And Andre's very presence disrupted that. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. But it was constant. A steady, calculated drip meant to erode his peace. And now, after all the small cuts, now that she'd swum in his water, worn his towel, mocked his culture, and twisted her words like daggers laced in syrup, Andre had had enough. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and remembered something from his college days. A harmless prank they used to play on cocky frat guys who hogged the hot tubs. It involved itch powder. It was time Susan learned what it felt like to be uncomfortable. Really, really uncomfortable. Andre wasn't a man who rushed into conflict. He'd been raised on principles: speak when needed, act when necessary, and never let someone else's ignorance define your behavior. His father, a former Air Force sergeant turned high school physics teacher, used to say, "Don't let fools rent space in your head. They can't afford the deposit." So Andre tried. He gave it one more shot. That Saturday morning, he waited until he saw Susan watering her petunias out front, dressed in her usual lemon-patterned sundress and visor hat, humming along to some Frank Sinatra tune. He walked across the street slowly, hands open, no tension in his stride. "Hey, Susan," he called gently. She turned. Her smile was tight. "Andre. How neighborly of you." He ignored the tone. "Look, I just wanted to have a quick word. About the pool situation." She raised her brows. "Oh? I thought we already talked about that." "We did," he said calmly. "But I want to be clear. You can't come onto my property without permission. I don't want this to escalate. I just want boundaries respected." Susan blinked, then chuckled. "Oh, Andre. You really do take things so seriously. Look, I get it, this place is your little sanctuary. But honey, this is America. We don't build fences just to hide behind them." Andre frowned. "It's not about hiding. It's about respect. About ownership." She stepped forward slightly, voice lowering. "Let me explain something to you. This neighborhood has always had a tone, a certain standard. When people come in and try to turn it into something else, something loud, flashy, urban, it throws everything off balance. Andre stared at her, stunned. Urban? Susan shrugged. You know what I mean. He did. Again. The next day, he woke up to find footprints on his deck, wet ones. Towels missing. A pair of sunglasses left behind. She'd come back. And the day after that? She brought a friend. 2 older women, reclining by his pool with their legs dangling in the water, sipping iced tea like it was Sunday brunch. One of them looked up at him with a forced smile and said, "Oh, we didn't realize you were home." Susan said this was the community pool. Andre didn't answer. He just turned around, walked back inside, and closed the blinds. His hands were shaking. This wasn't just about territory anymore. It was about identity. Power. Dignity. And Susan wasn't going to stop until she tore those things from him, or until he reminded her, once and for all, that he was the one in control. Andre sat in his office that night, lights off, fingers steepled under his chin. Outside the window, moonlight danced on the water of his pool, the same pool that, for the 3rd time that week, had been violated. Towels strewn, snack wrappers by the deck, and, insult to injury, lipstick stains on one of his glasses. He hadn't even seen them come in that time. Susan must have waited until he left for work. She was calculating now. Coordinated. Emboldened by his silence. Andre had always believed in logic, diplomacy, quiet strength. But this wasn't a debate. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a siege. And Susan had mistaken his silence for surrender. That's when his eyes fell on an old cardboard shoebox on the top shelf of his closet. He hadn't opened it in years, since college. A box of dumb prank stuff, as he used to call it. Inside, among the leftover glitter bombs and fake parking tickets, was one tiny plastic jar with a label smudged from age. Itch powder, handle with care. Andre stared at it for a long moment. He hadn't thought about that powder in over a decade. Back in his university days, it had been used for petty revenge, sprinkled into laundry baskets or tucked into sports equipment. Harmless. Temporary. Infuriating. He unscrewed the cap carefully and sniffed, still potent. He chuckled to himself. No violence. No confrontation. No need to raise his voice. Just a lesson. A lesson in cause and effect. The next morning, Andre prepared meticulously. He vacuumed the pool, adjusted the pH levels, and left everything picture perfect. On purpose. He even added fresh towels to the deck, arranged with military precision. It was a trap disguised as hospitality. And then, just before he left for a fake errand, he poured a small amount of the powder, barely a teaspoon, into the pool skimmer. It would dissolve, circulate just enough through the shallow end. Non-toxic, but guaranteed to cause serious discomfort for anyone bold enough to dip in. He checked the cameras twice. Then he waited. Andre didn't have to wait long. By 10:17 a.m., the camera feed on his phone lit up. A notification pinged. Motion detected, backyard. He swiped it open casually, knowing exactly what he'd see. There she was, Susan Whitmore, strutting onto his deck in a wide-brimmed sun hat and oversized sunglasses like she was headed to a Malibu resort. She was talking animatedly on her phone, dragging a canvas tote overflowing with magazines, sunscreen, and what looked like a portable speaker. Yeah, she was saying. He's never home. It's practically a public pool at this point. And if he is home, he's too spineless to stop me. Andre didn't react. He just leaned back on his couch, watching silently. She tossed her things onto one of his lounge chairs and stepped into the shallow end with a satisfied sigh, the water rippling around her calves. Then she eased in fully, floating on her back, eyes closed, basking in the sun. For the first 3 minutes, everything looked normal. Then it started. A subtle shift. She wriggled her shoulder. Scratched her thigh. Shifted again. Andre leaned forward. Susan sat up suddenly, her face twitching in confusion. She rubbed her arms briskly, then scratched both elbows with increasing urgency. Ugh, what the hell? She splashed water on her neck, as if that would help, but it only made things worse. The itch powder had fully circulated now, microscopic particles clinging to every inch of exposed skin. Her movements grew frantic. She stood up in the shallow end and began slapping at her arms and legs, twisting and turning like she was trying to shake invisible ants off her body. Her hat fell off, landing with a plop on the water. Andre watched as she reached under the straps of her swimsuit and started clawing at her back. "Oh my God, what is this?" she shrieked. "What did he put in this pool?" She scrambled out, dripping and panicked, grabbing the nearest towel, only to toss it aside when it failed to offer any relief. Her skin was turning blotchy, red welts forming across her shoulders and thighs. She kicked over the tote bag, yanked off her sunglasses, and stomped barefoot across the patio, pacing, scratching, muttering, gasping. "Would you have used itch powder too? Type yes or no in the comments." Andre muted the video feed and smiled. He wasn't proud. Not exactly. But he felt resolved. This wasn't cruelty. This was clarity. Susan had crossed every boundary, physical, social, moral. She had mocked, trespassed, insulted, and dismissed. Now, for once, she was the one squirming. And she hadn't even realized. The real itch had nothing to do with powder. It was the sting of consequences finally catching up. Susan was full-blown frantic now. Still pacing his backyard, still scratching furiously, she finally whipped out her phone and screamed into the screen like it had personally wronged her. "Hello? Yes, 911? I'm being attacked. He put something in the water. My skin's on fire. I think it's chemical. It's some kind of assault." Andre sat in his living room, calm, the live feed still rolling on his phone. He muted the sound and let her panic play out. His hands were steady. His breathing even. She had just stepped onto his property. Used his pool. Ignored his repeated warnings. And now, she was playing the victim. Typical. 10 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights lit up his street. Andre stepped outside, hands in plain sight, expression neutral. 2 officers exited the cruiser, 1 male, 1 female. They headed toward the backyard where Susan was now wrapped in a towel, her face blotchy, her hair soaked and wild, still scratching like a woman possessed. "There he is!" she cried, pointing at Andre. "He poisoned me! He put something in the water, look at me!" The officers turned to Andre. "Sir, can we talk to you?" He nodded, his voice calm. "Of course. But before anything, I'd like you to check my security cameras. Everything's recorded, audio and video." They exchanged a look. "And, just to clarify," Andre added, "she broke into my property. Again." Susan exploded. "Are you seriously going to believe him? I've lived here longer than he has. People like that don't just—" She caught herself, but not soon enough. The officer's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am," the female officer said sharply, "let's keep this respectful." Susan's voice dropped to a mutter, but the damage was done. The officer looked back at Andre. "Let's see the footage." He smiled faintly. "Right this way." The officers followed Andre inside. Within minutes, the footage was on screen, high definition, time-stamped, crystal clear. Susan waltzing into his yard. Splashing into the pool. Lounging. Rummaging through his things. No invitation. No permission. Her rant about Andre being too spineless to stop her played loud and unfiltered. The officers stood silently as it looped. When they stepped back outside, Susan was pacing, still scratching, her towel now half fallen, exposing angry red welts across her skin. "Well?" she snapped. "Are you arresting him or not?" The male officer shook his head. "Ma'am, from what we've seen, you trespassed. Multiple times." Her face dropped. "No. No, this is his fault. You saw what he did. Look at me." She jabbed at her arms. "I'm falling apart because of him. We didn't see any evidence of chemical sabotage, the female officer said evenly. And you admitted, on tape, you knew this wasn't your property. Susan's voice cracked. This is insane. She turned toward Andre, who stood calmly at the patio steps, hands in his pockets. You smug little. She spat, then lunged forward and slapped him across the face. The crack echoed. Everyone froze. Andre didn't move. Didn't flinch. The officers did. The female cop stepped in fast. That's assault. Click. The sound of handcuffs. You're under arrest, ma'am. Susan gasped as the cuffs locked around her wrists. You can't do this. I'm the victim. But no one was listening anymore. For once, the neighborhood was watching. And they weren't on her side. Comment 1 if you think Andre handled this better than most people would have. Comment 2 if you would have done it differently. The police cruiser pulled away slowly, Susan curled in the back seat, red-faced and still muttering protests, as the doors closed on her voice. Andre stood silently on the porch, one cheek still stinging, but his posture unshaken. Across the street, curtains shifted. A few neighbors stepped out, first the couple with the terrier, then Mrs. Hargrove from the cul-de-sac, and finally the Henderson twins, holding lawn chairs and popcorn as if the entire neighborhood drama had been a live performance. No one said a word at first. Then someone clapped. It was Mrs. Hargrove. One firm clap. Then another. Soon others joined in. A few slow, deliberate nods. Quiet murmurs of, "About time," and, "She finally got what was coming." Andre exhaled, shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. Later that evening, he received 3 text messages and 1 handwritten note. Hey Andre, just wanted to say we support you. Let us know if you need anything. Derek and Mona, the couple with the terrier. Sorry we never said anything. We always knew she was a piece of work. The Hendersons. She left notes in our mailbox too. You just had the courage to say something. Anonymous neighbor. And the note, scrawled on lined paper and signed. You handled it better than most of us ever could. Thank you. By the end of the week, Susan's house was dark. Shades pulled. No more music. No more petunias. Some said she was staying with her sister in Portland. Others said she'd lawyered up. But no one really cared. The damage had been done, and not to Andre. It was her mask that cracked. Her quiet empire of control that crumbled. Andre, meanwhile, returned to his routine. Coffee at 7 a.m. A swim at 6 p.m. Peace finally restored, not because Susan left, but because Andre reclaimed it. And that weekend, for the first time in months, he invited friends over. Real friends. The backyard was filled with laughter, splashes, the smell of grilled shrimp, and the soft glow of string lights swaying in the breeze. Someone asked, half joking, You think she'll come back? Andre smiled, tossed another skewer on the grill, and answered without hesitation. If she does, he said, I've got more than just itch powder next time. Everyone laughed. And Andre leaned back in his chair, staring at the still surface of the pool, his pool, knowing he had won not just the battle, but the right to enjoy his life in peace. If this kind of justice made your day, hit that subscribe button. More HOA Karen stories coming daily. In the end, this wasn't just about a pool. It was about boundaries, physical, emotional, and moral, and what happens when someone believes they're entitled to cross them without consequence. Andre's story reminds us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's found in calm defiance. In refusing to let cruelty dictate your response. In standing firm, not with fists, but with principle. He didn't lash out. He didn't stoop to her level. He chose intelligence over rage, dignity over noise, and that made his victory all the more powerful. This story also shows the danger of silence in a community. For too long, Susan's behavior was tolerated. But when one person stood up, others found their voice too. That's how real change begins, not with anger, but with courage. So whether you're facing your own, Susan, or watching someone else struggle, remember, standing your ground doesn't make you aggressive. It makes you whole. And sometimes, justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs to itch a little, until the truth can't be ignored.